Hello, everyone. I'm Tracy, and I'm here with Shane. And today we're going to go into some details about Hurricane Milton. But did you know that they did a Category 5 hurricane simulation in 2009? And in this simulation, they made an estimated death count, determined the cost of the rebuild, and this whole thing was funded by FEMA. So Shane's going to go into more details towards the end of this video. Before we get started, though, I do want to remind everyone that in our book, we go through a lot of these details and give a kind of a bird's eye view of the global agenda and kind of explain why these things are happening and why things go down the way they do. And we're seeing a lot of similarities with Maui and subsequent tragedies. So, and it also helps support the work we do, and allows us to bring you guys better content. Before we get started, though, please subscribe before you leave and like, comment, and share this video so we can let as many people know about what's really going on. So with that, let's go into some of the photos of Hurricane Milton and some of the damage that we're seeing. So right here, this is the flight path of Hurricane Milton, and it actually was downgraded to a Category 3 by the time it hit land, which was really good because I think some reports were saying it was going to stay at a Category 5, which would have been extremely, extremely dangerous and damaging. And the next picture is...
So I wanted to add that it did make landfall in Siesta Key, just outside of Sarasota, which was just barely south of Tampa Bay, which was kind of a near miss. You could say this is an almost worst case scenario, and Tampa Bay really lucked out by having the hurricane hit to the south instead of to the north. All right.
All right, and then bring up the storm surge. I was just going to explain this: a picture of a car on the road and the waves coming in as Milton was making landfall.
Yeah, it almost looks like he's on the beach, but that's actually the street near the beach. All right.
The next one.
And then we have some more storm surge, and this is in downtown. I don't know if it's Tampa or Sarasota, but you can see that it's only like maybe a foot or so deep there where he is. And it turns out that the storm surge for Helene was actually worse in this area than the storm surge for Milton was.
Right. And I think they thought maybe it would go up past 10 or 13 feet, but it didn't get close to that. So fortunately, the flooding wasn't as severe as some predictions were.
Yeah. So if it would have made landfall as a Category 5, then they would have seen 15 to 20 plus foot storm surge. But it actually was downgraded to a Category 3 prior to making landfall. And that's probably one of the reasons that the storm surge wasn't quite as bad as they were predicting. All right. And then along with the storm surge, so the storm surge did increase by like 8 to 12 feet in some areas. And that was enough to unmoor these boats from their piers. However, when the water receded, some of these boats, as you can see, were left stranded on top of the docks themselves. And then we also have Tropicana Stadium. The roof was ripped off of Tropicana Stadium, which is actually unfortunate because Tropicana Stadium was one of the emergency evacuation areas. And you can see from this view that not only is there pieces of the roof debris laying all around in there, but I guess if you look really closely and read the caption at the bottom, there was a bunch of cots actually that were placed inside of here for people to use during the emergency. But after the roof came off, they could no longer use it as an emergency evacuation area. Another thing that happened was in St. Petersburg, where a crane fell against a building and caused a lot of damage. Now, this was during the event. And then the next morning, you can get a better view of it. And then if we zoom out, you can see how much damage that the crane actually did to the building itself. And then another thing we have is damage to what looks like a multi-story, perhaps apartment building, where the wall was completely ripped off of one side of the building. And this is actually reminiscent of what happens in Category 3 plus hurricanes, like we saw in Otis with the Category 5, Almost all of the walls were missing in Hurricane Otis. Okay, so let's go into the clips from Milton. All right, so the first clip I have, this is from the College of DuPage NEXRAD site, and it shows the hurricane making landfall. Now, this happened about 9:30 p.m. Eastern, and as you can see, the dark areas in the red indicate some of the worst of the storm. However, it looks like the eye is passing right over Tampa Bay, but here, I'll play this one more time. It looks like the eye is passing right over Tampa Bay. However, technically, the eye was just south of there in Sarasota. However, Tampa Bay did receive some of the highest rainfall totals, as you can see here by the dark red area. I also want to show another view. This is from the Regional and Mesoscale Meteorology branch RAMMB. This is from the Colorado State EDU site. And it shows the worst of the hurricane appears to have run right into Tampa Bay. And so,
And also, I wanted to mention it rained a lot before the hurricane even
yes, it did.
developed.
There was a secondary storm that developed in front of the hurricane to cause it to rain for many, many hours, if not like a whole day or two before the arrival of the hurricane. And I have a little clip that I want to show of that too.
As I mentioned before, again, this is just a lot of convection. This will be problematic tomorrow because what this is going to end up doing is moving into central Florida during the afternoon and evening, and that is going to dump a ton of rain across central and even parts of northern Florida. So if you're in Orlando, Tampa, Daytona Beach, and just north of I-4, this blob of convection is actually important because it's going to dump an additional few inches of rainfall tomorrow on top of what the actual hurricane will also be dumping. So that is something that we need to keep in mind here.
All right. So that blob of convection that he mentioned actually preceded the storm and dropped 10 to 12 inches of rain all across Florida prior to the arrival of the hurricane itself. Now, I've heard in the past, I've never been in a hurricane myself, but I've heard the figure of speech called calm before the storm. And I've heard that typically with a hurricane, there is some calm before the storm because most of the clouds and the moisture gets pulled into the hurricane itself. And so the weather ahead of the hurricane is usually a little bit more calm and a little bit more dry until the arrival of the hurricane. However, as we saw there was that convective blob. I have another view of this. So just prior to the arrival of the hurricane, you can see this convection exploding before it reaches landfall itself. And then there's another blob convection that gets even bigger. And that storm there in front of the hurricane actually dropped 10 to 12 inches of rain on Florida before the hurricane even arrived. So, there was already perhaps in some areas up to a foot of water before the hurricane even got there. So that's kind of strange if you ask me. All right. So now, something else that I want to go into is the fact that back in 2009, there was a simulation that was done on just such an event. Now, I want to also point out that there has not been a hurricane that passed through this area in over 100 years, especially a major hurricane like this. So it's been over 100 years since this area has received landfall from a major hurricane. All right, so this project was called Project Phoenix, and this is a Newsweek article about it that mentions that it was sponsored by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and the Florida Department of Emergency Management. And this was done in partnership with the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. Now, the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council ran these simulations, and they called it Project Phoenix. And I have a video that I'm going to show of it right now. All right. So it does sound a lot like what we know now as Build Back Better. But back in 2009, it just seems really strange and odd to me that, FEMA was not only part of the planning of the simulation here, but they are also part of the response as well. So I do see it as a little bit of a conflict of interest for FEMA to be not only involved in the planning, but the cleanup as well. It could almost incentivize the creation of future disasters or the lack of action to make the disaster actually come out, the outcome even worse. All right. So a few things that I wanted to point out from that video are the fact that, well, one of the early on in the video, you saw that they were talking about gas lines and people waiting for gas. That actually did happen this time. There was a lot of gas stations that ran out of gas, and there was a lot of people waiting in traffic for so long that they actually ran out of gas on the highway. So we've seen similar situations in the past where there was like tainted gas or not enough gas, and people got stuck on the road in the disaster, which is just another similar thing that happened to Maui.
And
All right.
Shane, it's starting to seem like the prediction of what was being said before landfall, they were predicting it to be much worse than it actually was.
It
Is
was
that kind of
looking like it
sums it
was,
up?
yes, they were predicting it to be much worse, and it was actually looking like it could be much worse because Hurricane Milton, after all, was a Category 5 hurricane, and there was at one point where it was under 900 millibars, which is it's almost a record for, it's like one of the top 5 strongest hurricanes by barometric pressure, and it was also one of the strongest hurricanes by wind speed as well. So Hurricane Milton at one point had sustained winds of 180 miles an hour, and it had gusts of up to 225 miles an hour, which is even stronger than Hurricane Otis. So that's another thing that, caused everyone to react the way they did, because it did look like we were having a worst case scenario of a Category 5 coming into Tampa Bay. Now, they did luck out a little bit because the vertical wind shear that it encountered near the Florida coastline did weaken it to a Category 3 before it made landfall. Plus, it also did landfall south of the bay, which caused the winds to blow out of the bay instead of into the bay. So it could have been much worse. So Tampa Bay dodged a bullet on that one, but we didn't know until the last minute what it was going to look like. So, yeah. Another thing I wanted to point out from that video is that they estimated $200 billion in damage. And they also have planning partners, which include private corporations and NGOs, which sounds very much like the public-private partnerships that we've been hearing so much about lately. They also do have smart city plans for Tampa, as well as smart city and 15-minute city plans for Cape Coral as well. So just keep that in mind that, the planners of these projects should not also be the ones helping to oversee the disaster response as well. All right. So that might bring us to the end of what we have for Hurricane Milton.
And so we're just going to go into a little bit of some of the more recent findings of Hurricane Helene, right, regarding the helicopter.
All right. So following up with Hurricane Helene, we actually did show in a previous video that there was a helicopter that had buzzed one of the distribution sites with its rotor wash, causing a lot of damage and even injuring people, one of which had to go to the hospital. So we have a little bit more information on this hurricane now. This was someone who had reported that the National Guard Chinook helicopter was seen buzzing the tower. This guy had reported this, I believe, on Twitter. And we also did get a response. So the North Carolina National Guard did respond, saying they are aware of the incident involving a Black Hawk helicopter. And they went on to say that the incident is currently under investigation and the crew has been grounded until the investigation is complete. So at least they did take action on that, and there has been something done. So hopefully there will be recourse in the situation, and hopefully the National Guard, well, not only the North Carolina National Guard, but the other state National Guards will not be put on notice to knock it off. All right. So there's that. I can show the footage. I want to show the helicopter footage here, just in case you haven't seen it. I have it right here. So this is one of the Black Hawk helicopters that did the rotor wash. You can see it blowing stuff all over the place, people running away. And yeah, so that was the Black Hawk that did the rotor wash, but there was also a Chinook too. The Chinook has not necessarily been identified yet. We're not sure if it belongs to the North Carolina or some other state's National Guard. However, you can see here, there's two different views of this Black Hawk buzzing the distribution site. All right. And then to follow up with one more thing about Hurricane Helene, we want to go into the death toll, about how it's been underreported, just like the death toll on Maui was underreported as well. So there's been a lot of people who have boots on the ground, whether they be volunteers or survivors that are from the area. We've heard several reports about the death toll being much higher than is reported in the mainstream media. And we also have a General Flynn, who has been boots on the ground, and he has also reported on the death toll, and we're going to hear it from him.
In North Carolina, there's over 1,000 dead that have been confirmed to me with just the body bags that have been filled. There are insufficient numbers of body bags, so there are dead bodies lying aside, and this is mainly up in North Carolina, that is already pushing over 1,000. My guess is that by the time we look at all of what has happened, we're going to be probably somewhere around 2,000 or north of 2,000 dead people. So the big picture is we're going to have over 2,000 Americans dead from a hurricane that was never expected to go up into the western hills of North Carolina.
All right. So he says 2,000 plus could potentially be dead. And I've even heard figures that reach as high as 3,000 or 4,000. However, we won't really know until, a long time from now when we see the list of the missing that come out, because anyone who's actually still missing at this point is most likely assumed to be deceased. And so that's why it's no longer a search and rescue operation. It is now a search and recovery operation. Okay. So that just reminds me of, on Maui, how they reported only 100 to 115 deaths, although the locals there have said that it's at least 480, if not more.
And then before we wrap up, I want to mention a channel that I've been following. And she's, I wouldn't say prepper, but she's someone that grows her own food and everything. And her channel is the Aeroponic Tower channel. And she is about an hour from Asheville, and she knows a lot of people. She has friends in the area, and she's reporting just very straightforward, honest facts that are coming through. She doesn't sensationalize anything. She doesn't downplay anything. She just really gives it to you straight. And I wanted to give her a shout out, and I'll put her link in the description. And her channel's grown over 50,000 subscribers. And I think she only had like a few thousand, but I like going to channels like that, where it's just a regular person that is trying to inform the public and, just giving the truth and not saying things to make it seem like a bigger deal than it is. So I wanted to mention that.
I also want to give another shout out to Real Fishing Life, who I actually got their name mixed up in the last video. But yeah, Real Fishing Life. It's a good channel to go check out. I've seen that his subscriber count has jumped almost 1,000 in the last day since we've mentioned him. So just be sure to go over there and give him a like and a subscribe. That is Real Fishing Life.
He's survived Milton. He decided to stay, and he's doing videos showing, what he's seeing and what he experienced. So
yeah, he actually survived Helene and Milton both. So he was on the edge of Hurricane Helene, and his mother's house actually was completely destroyed in Hurricane Helene. And then he also did ride out Hurricane Milton as well. So yeah, we hope he stays strong and continues to fight, because he's a warrior.
Okay. So I guess that's going to do it. If you have not subscribed yet, please do so, and like, comment, and share this video. And also, thank you guys so much for the past couple of weeks. Some of these videos have been shared like I think one of them is at like 7,000 shares, which for even a larger channel is unheard of. And certainly for my channel, that's never happened. So thank you guys so much for spreading the word and, ushering this new awakening that I feel is going on in the world right now. So I just wanted to thank you all for the support. And with that, we will see you all soon. Bye.